and Aggie Chambray, political correspondent at LBC. Great to have your company. Thank you so much. We're just talking about the heat wave, whether we could sleep through the night or not. Terrible, terrible sleep. But it's great to see your faces this Sunday. Thank you very much.
Unslept, but we're here.
Shall we kick off with the Sunday Express? Because it's getting really hot for the Prime Minister, isn't it, Kevin?
Yeah, and I think Number 10 are going to be really unhappy with this front page because Keir Starmer has written for the Sunday Express, which is obviously quite a coup for the paper, and they've rewarded them by slagging him off on the front page, basically. So they've done it in a negative way as far as Number 10 are concerned. So he's obviously written for the paper defending this deal that he did with Emmanuel Macron on returns for small boat migrants. But they've gone on the line, basically, of him being accused of selling out, striking a surrender deal that won't stop a single boat. Now, these are quotes from David Jones, who used to be a Tory minister and is now defected to Reform. It was announced just through the week there. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was quite funny, actually. One of the retorts from the Prime Minister to this criticism is he says that people are insulting the French. Well, the people criticising him don't care about insulting the French. They actually quite enjoy insulting the French. That's a sort of pastime for a lot of right-wing MPs. But yeah, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, won't it? I mean, at the end of the day, last week was the easy bit when he stood up beside Macron and said, right, we've struck this deal, it's groundbreaking. He said, this is how it's going to work. Initial pilot, maybe 50 a week being sent back. But he says it'll be a deterrent. We'll just have to wait and see. You know, if it's not a deterrent and the boats keep coming, then the Prime Minister's under an awful lot of pressure. Yeah,
and it'll be the numbers, won't it, Aggie, that people will be frustrated by. And it's hard for the government to put a number on how many gangs they've smashed, because it's those slogans that they put at the front and centre of, you know, their manifesto.
Indeed, and I think kind of smashing the gangs sounds pretty nebulous, and I think that's been part of the problem. You've got people saying we're going to smash the gangs, not really clear whether or not they are smashing the gangs, and then you also have these pictures, as you guys show, as other media outlets show, of boats coming over, small boats coming over, and we see those numbers ticking up every week. So it's another thing that the government basically has to deliver on, and they know they've got to deliver on it. They don't actually have that long. They've got 3, maybe 4 years. And Kevin's right. The question will be whether or not in these small numbers this is a deterrent, or whether they think after the pilot scheme ends, that will then make it a deterrent. Well, that might be too late.
And the other voices around this, Kevin, the people saying actually it's a betrayal of Brexit, essentially, this one-in, one-out policy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really follow that line of argument. I mean, as we all remember, one of the big arguments in favour of Brexit was, you know, take back control of our borders. Obviously, Macron didn't miss an opportunity to have a go at the Brexiteers. I mean, he can't help himself. Every opportunity he gets, basically, he hates Brexit, and he just, you know, he's a state visit. He doesn't care about sort of insulting his hosts by saying, "Oh, by the way, you were mad to vote for Brexit." So, you know, he blames Brexit for the whole migrant crisis. Obviously, Brexiteers say that's complete nonsense. And they will say, well, this is one of the benefits of Brexit, is that we can strike these types of deals. But, you know, the Tories failed to stop the boats. It's all on Labour now. And if they don't, then people are going to say, right, well, we've tried you lot, then maybe let's give Reform a go. That's basically the way it works.
OK, let's move on to the Sunday Telegraph, Aggie, and Reeves' £1.7 billion raid on business, they say, risk killing off the high street, a high street that many people feel like has disappeared over the last few years.
Indeed. So this is a story in the Sunday Telegraph, as you say, that the Chancellor's planning a £1.7 billion tax raid. So they say she'll use her budget, which we know is coming in the autumn, to increase business rates for department stores and supermarkets. And this is all about, as every economic story is at the moment, the black hole. The fact that the Chancellor does not have a lot of money, does not have much, if at all, any headroom. And that's obviously been made worse in the last few weeks when the Chancellor was forced to U-turn on the planned welfare cuts, or partially U-turn, I suppose, and also the winter fuel U-turn bill. So they've basically got billions of pounds that they need to plug. And we are at that stage in the cycle where we're looking at what taxes will rise. And this is apparently one of them, a £1.7 billion tax raid on retailers. So I think this is one of the things that will likely happen. We've also heard this week, if you're listening to PMQs, it sounded a lot like income threshold rates. Tax threshold rates will be probably they won't be unfrozen in 2028 from the sounds of things at PMQs. The Prime Minister just not ruling that out after being very clear on some other taxes. But I think we're just going to see loads of speculation, loads of stories like this in the run-up to the budget.
There is so much speculation, isn't there? And the backdrop of this is the OBR saying the economy in the UK, look, it's vulnerable. And so that's not the type of news that you want a year into administration, as well as the infighting, you know, that's going on reportedly within the Labour Party.
Yeah, I mean, it's not been a great first 12 months for Labour. There's no doubt about that. It's ironic that, you know, last year at the budget we were told that it was a one-off, raised £40 billion of tax, mainly to fill what they called the black hole that the Conservatives have left, and yet here we are again. We've got another black hole, which has been created by Labour, really, because, you know, they said they were going to save £5 billion from the welfare bill. They had to give up on that. Winter fuel, as Aggie said, they've given up on that. And all of a sudden, no wonder she was upset in Prime Minister's question. I think the fact that she's under so much pressure had a lot to do with that, really. And she's got to find the money from somewhere. And the problem as well, Labour have backed themselves into a corner by saying we're not going to put up income tax, we're not going to put up VAT or national insurance. That was in their manifesto. They say we're not going to resile from that. Well, it kind of limits your options. And the problem with putting up taxes on business is that can affect economic growth, which was meant to be the #1 mission of the government, was to grow the economy. We had figures there a couple of days ago showing it actually shrunk again in May. So yeah, everywhere you look, really, as far as Rachel Reeves is concerned, it's not good news.
There's a headache.
And it's worth saying as well, there's already been a backlash to this from business who are worried about exactly that, about the growth, when there's been a decline in growth already this week. And it just seems like the government boxes themselves in again and again and again. So as Kevin just said, Rachel Reeves said last year, that was a one-time budget, I'm not going to do that again. And I asked her that about a month ago now at a speech. I said, can I just check that's still the case? She said, yep, still the case, not going to do that again, not going to come back for £40 billion of tax rises again. But they are stuck. There is not a lot of money sloshing around. They're going to have to do something. And when you speak to people in and around the Labour Party, I spoke to a Labour grandee this week, they said they got it wrong. They should have, when Donald Trump came in, when the tariffs started, they should have said, which they did say, the world has changed, and then they should have said, and now we've got to look at everything again.
And tackle it right away.
And tackle it, because there is a sense that there's not people being honest and realistic. One minister saying this week, you know, I'm actually going to give up my job and become the minister for reality check, because no one's being realistic about the situation we're in and actually what we have to do to tackle it.
Maybe, potentially, one of the answers is the front page of the Sunday People then, Kevin. We need a wealth tax. This is First Minister Morgan saying this.
Yeah. She's given an interview, the Welsh First Minister's given an interview to the Sunday People. I mean, this is a live debate within the Labour Party. Lots of Labour MPs on the left say, well, it's easy, you just whack a wealth tax on those who are worth more than £10 million, get them to pay 2% of that a year, and you're raising billions of pounds a year, all your problems are solved at a stroke. I think that would be the absolute last resort for Rachel Reeves. They do not really want to do this. The Treasury don't like the idea of a wealth tax. It's one thing saying it, it sounds very easy, very simple, but it's actually very difficult to implement. And actually, when you read the story behind it, she talks about people who earn over £10 million, but that's completely different. This is about people whose wealth is not, that's not their salary is over £10 million, it's their worth, you know, their property portfolio, whatever. And it's very difficult to tax that. Other countries that have tried it as well, it's never really been quite so successful. So, yeah, I think that's one of the reasons, the main reason why Rachel Reeves isn't in favour of it. But there's no doubt in the run-up to the budget, this calls for it are going to get louder and
definitely.
louder.
It speaks, doesn't it, to a wider issue within the party, from voters and from MPs within the party too, about what Labour Party have we voted for from voters, and what Labour Party do MPs have on their hands? Because you've got the big row with the GMB union at the moment, you've got residential doctors who are calling for more money, and then if you kick the issue down the road about special educational needs, that's on the horizon with a bill in the autumn. Is this the party for the working people, essentially?
I think that's the question on a lot of people's lips. And as you say, there's a fight with the unions too, with Unite Union, Sharon Graham being extremely critical and that union voting to re-examine their relationship with the party. So there is a huge amount of worry. And I think that's why we've seen this consistent backlash from Labour MPs over various things like winter fuel, like the welfare cuts. And I think that's why, in some ways, the wealth tax is really interesting to a lot of those left-leaning Labour MPs because they want to raise money. But I think it's also appealing because if you are cutting welfare for millions of people, but then you are not, and the government says we are raising tax for people with the broadest shoulders, etc., etc. They're not at the moment introducing a wealth tax. They're not actually ruling it out, but they're not introducing it. But if you are cutting welfare, but you're also saying we're introducing a wealth tax, I think that is that's a much easier narrative for the Labour Party than just saying, well, look, it's not going to work. It hasn't really worked in other countries, which is true, and not doing it. But I think that is then really difficult for a government that's trying to say we are trying to actually just work. We are trying to get public services to work. We're trying to get this country to work, and actually wants taxes that are going to work. But then also they want this story to tell, which I think everybody would agree they haven't necessarily had in their first year.
No, this is it. And people looking for answers. People want to feel change. And perhaps for many people that is Reform UK. However, Reform UK have their own storm. It's the front page of the Sunday Times because one of their MPs, apparently, investigation by the Sunday Times, was paid a salary by a bank when he took out COVID loans. And we're talking about James McMurdoch, aren't we, Aggie?
We are indeed. So this is the second story in the Sunday Times over 2 weeks about James McMurdoch. Now, he was a Reform UK MP until last week when the Sunday Times approached him. That story was about him borrowing £70,000 through two firms in 2020, one previously dormant, the other with negligible assets. After he was approached by the Sunday Times last week, he then basically voluntarily withdrew the whip while the investigation was ongoing. And now, then during the week, he said he'd had some independent advice. He said he'd taken some privileged advice, which he chose to keep private at the time, but he was going to be an independent MP for the rest of his time in Parliament. So Reform UK going from 5 MPs to 4 MPs once again. And then there's this follow-up story from the Sunday Times today saying that he allegedly borrowed tens of thousands of pounds in COVID loans while also having a salary. So this is quite historic in the sense that it's from COVID, it's from 2020, and it's from not when he was an MP, but it's obviously quite a serious allegation. He remains under investigation by the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards and was separately referred to the Public Sector Fraud Authority last week.
What damage does this do to Reform, if any, do you think, Kevin?
I don't think it'll do much damage to the box. Strangely enough, I was speaking to a former Tory cabinet minister a couple of days ago, and he was saying, we should stop obsessing the Tory MPs, he says, the Tory party. Don't worry about stuff like this, he says, because out there in the public, people don't care about this type of stuff. They just think
this Westminster bubble
issues. You
I
get excited about it in Westminster, he says, but real people it's not going to enter their thinking when they come to decide whether or not to vote for reform. The guy as well, he isn't a Reform MP anymore. He's unlikely to be again, I think, by the sounds of things. And I just don't see it affecting reform. It's a little bit like Donald Trump in America.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Political rules don't really apply to reform right now. People are much more sick and tired, really, of Labour and the Conservatives, and things like this, they're happy just to overlook it because they think that reform, at least, are different.
Talk to them.
Yeah, exactly. But, there's no doubt it is a serious issue because, if he has taken money from these bounce-back loans, there's no suggestion, I don't know if he has paid them back or anything like that. It is serious, and it speaks to a wider issue about how the Conservatives handled the COVID pandemic at that time.
Yeah, OK. We'll stick with the Sunday Times, actually, because there's another story on the front page, and it's a child dies with measles, and this is as parents fail to take the jab in the first place.
Yeah, and
it's plummeting across the country.
Yeah, it's really worrying. This is in Liverpool, in Alderhay. Now, this was a child, it's quite carefully worded, the headline, the child died with measles, not from measles, so there were other health issues going on, but they're saying that there's an outbreak in Liverpool because of really low vaccination rates. It's only 73% in Liverpool, which is significantly lower than the average, which is 86% across the northwest and the whole of England. Now, as we know, with vaccines, you need this herd immunity. You need as many children as possible to be vaccinated. But it looks as though, obviously, if it's faith in the vaccine or the vaccines in general, now we know there's been a lot of anti-vax stuff out there on social media on the back of the pandemic, and but it has real-world consequences. It's a highly contagious and very dangerous disease. I think a lot of people are quite dismissive of measles. It's like, oh yeah, measles, it's one of those things that kids get and they get over it. But no, it can be deadly.
Course.
And if I mean, I hadn't realised this, that it's so infectious that it hangs around for up to 10 days. So you're infectious for up to 10 days, and you can spread it to 15 people. So you can see how very quickly it can explode.
Spread, yeah.
And it's very worrying indeed, because, as I say, lots of young kids' lives are being put at risk. Yeah,
OK. Well, I'll leave it there for this hour. Kevin, Aggie, thanks so much for your time, and the choice of pics for those story, really interesting. Thank you. OK, we're going to take a look at the weather now.